Dear Son, despite the opinions of some 16th century samurai, it has been proven time and again that ninjas are the coolest thing to have ever graced the planet. As a kid, I often fantasized about what my life would have been like if I was raised in the Iga province of Japan, learning martial arts, spying on my enemies, and silently making my master's foes disappear. Instead, I was stuck with filling our coal furnace, taking out the ashes, picking corn, and counting out boxes for delivery. Even though I haven't picked corn in over 10 years, I can still shuck an ear faster than anyone I know, but there's nothing stealthy or lethal about that, and the only person impressed by it is your mother. The fantasy of ninjas has been a social norm for some time now, but the popularity of ninjas hit a fevered peak in the 1980s thanks to Kevin Eastman and Peter Larradd's 1984 comic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the subsequent 1987 cartoon television series of the same name. My brother and I, along with pretty much every other male born between 1975 and 1985, were obsessed with the Ninja Turtles, martial arts, ninjas, and samurai. Of course, Ralph Macchio and his crane kick from 1984's The Karate Kid didn't help. Although we never had any formal training, or for that matter, never met anyone who was a martial artist, we would practice our karate in the woods by kicking and chopping dead and decayed trees that, with enough force, could have been pushed over. The trees fell with a satisfying crack and thud as we fell our imaginary foes. The best places and times to practice our jump kicks were, in the summertime, into the pool, fall, into a pile of leaves, winter, into a snow pile, and spring, on my little sister. And shuriken training was done by throwing fist-sized pieces of shale at basketball-sized wasp nests. When a piece of shale would hit the nest, it would chunk into the nest, and my brother, cousin, and I would run like hell in a serpentine pattern away from the nest. It never really stopped us from getting bitten. Parental warning. For the love of God, don't throw rocks at bees and hornets' nests. I've been bitten enough for me, you, and your kids to know that your mom will kill me if she found out you got the idea from me. Seriously, don't. But the height of our martial arts escapism would happen in the arcades and at home on our NES. We would slug quarter after quarter into machines like Kung Fu Master, a title on the NES simply known as Kung Fu, the Shinobi series, and if we were lucky enough at the rental store, we could rent a copy of the coveted Ninja Gaiden, which of course at the time was known as Ninja Gaiden, and the main character was Ryu, because no one knew how to properly pronounce either. As I've already mentioned, my source of income was a trickle to say the least, but most of my cash back then went towards the acquisition of new games for our NES. My last NES game purchase that I made was also my worst. Certainly, my opinion on the game isn't the same as everyone else's, and as I retell you this story, I'm hoping that I don't offend any of the game's decades-long fans. I'm talking about Wrath of the Black Manta, a wrath which I've felt all the way up to the time when I put this story into words. One day in 1990, my family went on one of our usual weekend trips to the mall just to get out of the house and spend some time together. I was in possession of about $25, and I was jonesing for some hardcore ninja action. My brother and I had just seen the live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, and the 4-player cooperative Ninja Turtles arcade cabinet was hungry for more of our cash. But that wouldn't satisfy the shuriken-shaped hole in my heart when we had to abandon the mall and head home to our ninja-free selection of video games. I went into KB Toys and began to peruse their game selection with hopes that Ninja Gaiden or perhaps TMNT the video game was on sale. No red stickers on either. No luck. As I was about to give up, when out of the corner of my eye I spotted a red box decorated with a ninja dressed in all black garb, jumping through the air with a sickle in one hand and a sword in the other. It was on sale for $20. Radical. Gathering all my strength, I focused on not acting like a total nut as I nervously asked the woman behind the counter, "May I see that Black Mantis game?" Yeah, I got the title wrong, who cares? Ninjas. Having never rented the game before, I put my faith once again in the 1-inch thumbnails. Yeah, there were ninjas in this game. Good enough for me. Here's my cash. I took it home and my brother and I played it, and we were moderately satisfied with the experience, but I was riding high on my ninja lust. As the days and weeks went by, as I was working on getting better and better at the game, a tiny little voice in the back of my head would whisper louder and louder every time I fired up the NES. This game stinks. But how could it stink? Ninjas, throwing stars, mysterious powers! This game stinks. This game can't stink. I'm a smart person, I have good taste in video games, I don't make bad purchasing decisions. No brain, shut up and listen. This is a good game. I'm going to play this game until you and I both agree that this is good. This game, it stinks. Over time, I loaned the game out to kids at school. A few kids liked it, but it stung when I'd hear the response that echoed the one in the back of my head. Yeah, you can have this back. This game stinks. Eventually, I beat the game, and was supremely dissatisfied with the obnoxious final boss and the 20-second long ending. I let go of my stubborn ego, and let the realization wash over me fully. This game stinks, and I wasted a lot of my time and money. Wrath of the Black Manta is a side-scrolling action game published in the US in April of 1990 by Taito, creators of Bubble Bobble and Space Invaders, and now owned by Square Enix. In Wrath of the Black Manta, you play as the Black Manta through 5 different stages, beating up bad guys with your ninja stars from long range and your daggers at close range. You can also use a variety of special skills available through the options menu. At the end of each level, you fight a boss, and then you're whisked off to another part of the world to bring down El Toro, a drug lord who finances his operation by kidnapping children, some of whom look like 1970s Neil Diamond. Power and life upgrades can be found in storage rooms and hidden areas. Even for the time, the sprites were overly large, poorly drawn for the NES, and poorly animated. The controls were clunky, the level designs were overly repetitive, the story was lame, to say the least. Most of the game was a giant ripoff of Shinobi by Sega, stealing basic gameplay concepts, and even the plotline. But that's not all it lifted. There's a voodoo warrior boss, because ninjas are always out to take down voodoo, who looks just like the voodoo priest from Live and Let Die, and one of the bosses looks like the Walker from RoboCop. Ugh, and the horrible music would just loop ad nauseum. It'll burn into your skull. The final boss fight was an exercise in patience. You had to kill him using a specific combination of your 4 special powers in the correct order, or else he would go back to full health, and you would lose a bit of your life. The game offered a few continues, but there was no password system or save state for the cartridge. Doing research for the game 23 years later, I found out the game was originally meant to star the Black Manta, Aquaman's arch-nemesis. Aquaman was meant to be the final boss. That would have been a pretty neat game, but Taito, the developers, never gained the licensing rights, so they fell back on the Shinobi card. I suppose all of this wouldn't matter if I found the game to be fun. I didn't, but I tried to convince myself that I did because I had spent some hard-earned cash on it. I regret putting this game on our list because playing through it now was even more of a chore than before. I won't make that mistake ever again. From here on out, all of the rest of the games on the list will be good because I want this to be a fun experience for us. What's the life lesson from this story? I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it's that we all make terrible decisions, and a good number of us, myself definitely included, sometimes live in denial about those choices. After all, a poor purchasing decision feels like we're not as smart as we think we are, and no one wants to feel stupid. You'll run into this all the time as you grow up. Your friends will date attractive people, but will be blind to their ugly personalities. Fans will irrationally defend terrible movies, books, music, and video games just because it's by their favorite artists, actors, directors, development studios, whatever. And you can't get too mad at them about it. It's human nature. There's only one way to avoid living in this type of denial, and that's to do your research ahead of time before spending your precious limited resources, whether that be cash or time. And even then, it's not a foolproof plan. But for the most part, you can't blame the teacher if you get a poor grade. You can't blame the critic if they dislike something you love. It must be frightening to wake up one day and realize you've married a beautiful jerk. So maybe that is the lesson. Take your time, study, do your research, and don't rush into anything that might cost you something near and dear to you until you're 100% sure of what the outcome might be, even if it has ninjas. Love, Dad.